Up against, because I'm live streaming the entire class.
Why are you live streaming?
Because it's Pope Grenzus. He's blessing us all.
Grenzus.
Y'all want
Grenzus.
like candy? I have some. Would you like? Oh, that's not.
Better not be laced.
No, these are fake Doritos. Don't look at them.
I better have something to lay it up against.
What candy do you like?
Pope Grenzus will be here shortly.
Well, you have to share.
Hope this is a partner quiz. Laced pretzels.
Do you like Sour Patch Kids? I don't like Sour Patch Kids.
I am a Sour Patch Kid.
I don't get you for like Sour April, what do you want? What? Do you want?
That's even worse.
Bless the people.
The Pope does not make it.
Do you want a Maltesers? It's very European.
It's very British.
British.
Oh,
I don't know what Maltesers are from.
do you want
Okay, you guys have this written down, so we're gonna get started.
Oh,
Written
crap.
down?
Yes, I have it written down.
I better start the timer. I better start the timer.
Yeah.
I was distracted.
It's Spooptober.
Wait.
All the kids in Fortnite costumes are gonna room today.
Yeah, because you have to take off your hat. Heck yeah. Oh, he's dead. I gave that to him because I'm cooler.
That's awesome.
I'm a
You have to bless me. I have an
butterfly.
arrow in my head, Pope. You have to bless me now.
Musical?
It's an opera.
Yeah, it's not.
At least I haven't seen any Fortnite kids today,
You
so
have to bless
you
his
know.
wounds
yeah.
so he can get that.
Oh, it's all healed. And my glasses are off. I can see now. No.
He will live.
I don't know enough Latin to give you that blessing.
All you have to do is go like this.
Stay.
What games were made in England?
Oh yeah, when I used to go and because I used to go to Tuesday Mass, they would have all of their songs in Latin. Really? Yeah.
What games were made in England at the expense of the monarchy?
Yeah. I mean, like most of instead of like English, it was like in Latin.
Love that.
Oh my gosh.
Is this a partner quiz?
Oh, that's the library.
We're having a quiz.
Oh, this isn't quiz. This isn't a quiz. Never mind. It's just questions. I scared everybody in this
It's a
class.
little freaky.
I need to dye my hair black so this looks more realistic, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nathan can borrow it.
I'm good. You want to wear it?
Yeah.
You'll have lice if you wear it now.
Oh, why is this
Lice.
so big?
I'm kidding. Why does he take my glasses off every time?
Today is the 31st.
Okay. If you can hear Pope Grenzus, give me a clap. All right. Guys, we're going to get started. It's good to see you. Some of you guys have some really cool costumes on.
Thanks, I'm a Mariners fan, so I can wear this hat.
Mine finally came in the mail, and I'm pretty stoked about how kind of fun it is. It's been cool. I'll definitely have to wear this next year when I do the whole Renaissance.
Yeah.
The whole Renaissance.
We missed out this
thing,
year.
And talk about the popes.
How many children died for your costume?
I had to sell one of my kidneys.
It's fine.
It's worth it though. It's a little wrinkly. Yeah, I got another one, right?
Yeah.
Oh wait. Wait.
What are you feeling? Oh.
Now I can see.
Oh, now the Pope can see.
That's where I keep my
He can see all of our blessed faces. Hold on, look at me. Look straight at me. Holy shit, you're
Okay.
dead.
Hey guys.
How did the arrow bend?
Today we got quite a bit to go over. Let's talk about the next
I
few
see
days,
you,
okay,
Aiden.
'cause we have a busy time
Don't
here.
call.
We have the test part 1 on Friday, so multiple
Yay.
choice is going to be on Friday, just a reminder. Part 2 is going to be Monday. Please feel free to grab one of those extra credit outlines, okay? You guys have a whole weekend to work on it, so not a bad idea to grab a couple of those. Your packet is not due tomorrow or today, it's due Friday.
Ching, ching.
Friday. Okay, and we do have a quiz tomorrow, so just be ready to roll with that. Was our last one a partner quiz or individual?
Individual.
So we'll make this one a partner
Hey.
quiz tomorrow, okay? So we'll make that one a partner quiz.
What period is
Okay,
it?
what? Yeah, do that
What
one
period?
when it's, not right now, but yeah,
Picture of
when we have a moment, okay? So today we are going to run roughshod through the English Revolution That's why you have this, entry task dealing with what happened in England, and also this
Wow.
graphic organizer. Okay, so this is what I want you to do today, guys.
Holy
During
jeez.
the lecture,
What is that?
I want you to take notes. I mean, you're still gonna have to take notes in your packet, right? But I want you to take notes on this. Okay, this is gonna help you keep everything straight. I will select it after the
Straight.
lecture,
I keep
and
everything
you'll get
there.
a nice, cool 15 points if you do it right. Okay.
Hey.
All right. So there's a lot that goes to the English Revolution, so that's why I gave you this to help keep it organized and keep it straight. If we do have time, we have some MCQs that will be due tomorrow, and hopefully we can work on those together. So I want to just sort of get rolling. Do you guys have any questions before we get going?
Wait,
What?
so, what do you mean?
What? Yeah, take notes on that.
But also take notes on this.
Yeah. Yeah. Either way, I mean, I want you to take notes on the sheet of paper right now. But if you do both, that's fine too. Okay, so let's get started. Yesterday, guys, we had a long lecture about a lot of stuff. The bottom line is this: we have new players on the block in East Central Europe that are becoming important on the international scene. Russia, Austria, which is now home to the Habsburgs,
Siberia.
and the Holy Roman Empire, and Prussia. Okay, and we came to the conclusion here that absolutism is not absolute.
Yeah.
It is.
It's absolutely not. Absolute.
It's a pipe dream. Okay, so the power of the rulers is not absolute. They are dependent on other people to help them carry out the wishes of the government. Yeah.
So you put that in the Ottoman Empire section, so does that correlate to them very well?
No, not really. It just happens to. I just kind of smashed. I just sort of smashed it in there.
And then they just died off or something?
No. No, I mean, it doesn't really have any connection at all to the Ottomans. Even though I guess Suleiman would have been kind of an absolute ruler in his own way. Yeah. All right, so let's get to this. This page right here, I just want you to take notes out of the textbook from. Okay, I want to get to the English Revolution today.
Yeah.
And we might remember a dude named Henry VIII. Okay.
VIII.
Henry VIII had how many wives?
5, right?
No. Six.
Oh,
six wives.
six,
Six
okay.
wives. How many surviving kids did he have?
3.
Well, he had 3. Edward died pretty,
So
pretty
2 then?
young. And surviving meaning they made it through childbirth, through the first few years.
Yeah.
So, Edward was there, so we'll say 3. Okay, so Edward was the king after his father passed away. And then he passed away relatively quickly. Bloody Mary took over, right? And then she lasted a little while, and then she died of a pituitary tumor, I guess, cancer. And then Elizabeth took over. So Elizabeth rules for quite a while. She ends up dying in 1603, and there is nobody left on, you can hear Henry VIII rolling over in his grave right now. There's nobody left in the Tudor dynasty. They're gone. So we have to kind of trace the family tree back and find out, well, who's going to take over for the Tudors now as the legit monarchs of England? Well, come to think of it, it's their relatives in Scotland, the Stuarts. And Mary, Queen of Scots, who we didn't really mention, but she actually was thrown in jail. She was a cousin of Elizabeth. She was thrown in jail for this plot to overthrow Queen Elizabeth. Don't know if it was a legit accusation, but she ended up getting executed, and Elizabeth was really kind of torn when this actually happened. But anyways, Mary, Queen of Scots, had a son, and his name was James, and he was the current king of Scotland, and they are brought in to be the new monarchs of England. Okay, so James the First ends up being the next king of England. Now, there was some resistance to this guy. Obviously, he's Scottish, and it came from various religious groups and whatnot. Bless you. But King James, again, ends up being the cousin of Elizabeth. He's part of the Stuart dynasty, and he did believe in the divine right of kings, okay? This whole, absolute idea that, hey, I'm put here by God, okay? And I'm responsible to no one except God. And Parliament didn't really like that. Okay, the previous kings and queens didn't have that point of view in England. This guy did. So he alienates Parliament right off the bat. James asked Parliament later on for some money to help run the government, but Parliament had the power of the purse. They're the ones who ran the economic show in England. And Parliament denied his repeated requests for money. So right away, there's tension. There's tension between Parliament, which is like the English version of Congress. Okay, they make the laws, controlling the money here. So tension between Parliament and the king. Now, religiously, we got to talk about the Puritans. Okay. Now, guys, let's go back to John Calvin. John Calvin and the Calvinists came about during, obviously, the Protestant Reformation. And we know that his ideas spread in France. And the French Calvinists were known as, what was the word? Huguenots. Yeah, Huguenots, okay? Just for simplicity's sake, essentially, the Calvinists in England were known as the Puritans, okay? So we have the Huguenots in France, the Puritans in England. All right, so here's what the Puritans wanted James to do. They wanted James to eliminate what was called the Episcopal system of church organization that was used in the Church of England. So that means Episcopal is E-P-I-S-C-O-P-A-L. Episcopal. And that basically just means that the bishop plays a major role in church affairs, in church organization. Okay? So they wanted James to eliminate the Episcopal system in favor of a Presbyterian model. Okay? And the Presbyterian model is where church elders are going to play an important role in government. Okay? So basically what we're saying is we have kind of a group of church elders that are going to be more important than the bishop. So they wanted this change made. James said, you know, I understand Presbyterian is like Scottish, you know, it's Scottish Protestant religion here, but no, we're not going to do that. We're not going to do this because the Anglican Church supported James coming into power, and he wasn't going to alienate an ally of his, which would be the Anglican Church, by making changes with it and toying with it and tinkering with it. Okay? So, tension. Now, James the First, do we have his dates of rule here, 1603 to 1625?
Yeah.
Okay, we have that written down. Okay, important actions, important ideas. Well, he believed in divine right, monarchy, right? You can write that down. He clashed with Parliament. He clashed with the Puritans. By the way, he gave the go-ahead to revise the Bible as well. Over here, the King James version of the Bible. Yeah, it's an absolute travesty.
What?
The King James version of the Bible was changed a bit from earlier versions of the Bible. Just saying, okay?
What do you mean?
So like for his own personal gain kind of thing?
We're going to say that the translators took certain embellishments.
Certain liberties.
Certain liberties, yes, certain liberties.
Jesus was low-key the home.
I don't know about that, but all right. So, guys, we're going to move on. 1625, James dies, and his son takes over, Charles I. This is where it really, you know, the feces starts hitting the oscillating device. Okay?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. So, 1625 to 1649. So this dude also believed in the divine right of kings, and he was a little full of himself. Look at this painting of Charles I.
Got 3 of them.
3 angles.
Yeah, so 3 different angles to get all of his good sides in there. To say he was a bit of an egomaniac would be an understatement, I think. Anyways, in 1628, so a few years into his reign, the Petition of Right was passed by Parliament. The Petition of Right. It was passed by Parliament. And what it did is it prohibited taxation without Parliament's consent. So you could not just say, hey, we need to tax these people over here. No, you have to run it through Parliament and get their approval, okay? So it prohibits taxation without Parliament's consent. Also, it prohibited arbitrary imprisonment.
Yeah, that's a big word.
That is a big word. Basically this, arbitrary imprisonment is this. Hey, you know what? I don't like the way you look, Brayton. I'm throwing you in jail. I'm throwing you in jail, dude. Okay?
You look very arbitrary.
So you could.
Okay? That means you can't just throw people in jail for whatever reason you want.
That's dumb. You should be able to.
Okay? Now the next part of the petition of right is this. You cannot declare martial law in times of peace. And guys, by martial law, that means military rule. If it's peaceful in the country, you can't send out the troops to just control things and order people around. So no martial law in peacetime. Charles looks at this petition of right passed by Parliament and says, you know what? I'm not really fond of this. It's kind of controlling my powers.
Doesn't benefit me, so.
Exactly, it doesn't benefit me, but he accepts it. Later on, he changes his mind because it limits royal power. I know certain politicians who probably wouldn't like things like this pass their way.
That stupid Queen of England.
Maybe.
They need the Queen of England.
Okay. All right. So, guys, here's the thing. In 1629, Charles decides to dismiss Parliament. And Parliament was dismissed. He said, okay, you guys can go home for a while. We'll call you back together when needed. Usually that was, within a short amount of time. And he decides to not call them back. Parliament doesn't meet because he wanted to rule without them. Because he didn't like the petition of right. He felt like they were trying to limit his powers. So from 1629 until 1640, it's called the time of his personal rule, where he rules without Parliament meeting. Okay? You guys can all go home. Yeah. Now
Take a
here's the
fiver.
problem, guys. Who had the power of the purse?
The Parliament.
The Parliament. They're the ones who collected taxes and got the money in. And after a while, he's finding that the government starts going a little bankrupt. They're not getting money in, and he's got to find ways to collect taxes. So he issues this ultimatum out to some of the coastal towns, and he ordered what was called ship money, S-H-I-P, ship money. And that was a tax on seacoast towns to help pay for defenses, to protect the coastal towns. And this aroused serious opposition from middle-class merchants and the landed gentry, and people really started hating on poor Chuck. Chuck, Charles.
Oh.
Yeah. All right, so he's making an enemy of Parliament, and he now is going to start pissing off the Puritans. All right, so this is what he did. The Church of England had something called the Book of Common Prayer, the Anglican Book of Common Prayer. It was really put into place by Queen Elizabeth. Anyways, he wanted to impose the Anglican Book of Common Prayer on the Scottish Presbyterian Church. And the Scots rebelled. They didn't like that. Even though, Charles was a Scot himself, he was trying to manipulate the Scottish Presbyterian Church. And these financial problems arose. You need money to raise the army to go fight the Scots. And so he's like, oh, damn it. I got to call Parliament into session to get some money to put down these uppity Scots. So he calls Parliament in session in 1640, and to say that they were a little pissed off is an understatement. They hadn't met in 11 years. And so Parliament decides to meet and keep meeting as long as they want to. And the time period 1640 to 1660, they pretty much met continuously. I mean, obviously you go home and sleep or whatever, but then you come back the next day, you get back to work, 1640 to 1660 is called the Long Parliament.
Oh.
Yes. And they took a series of steps that placed severe limitations on royal authority. Number one, they abolished ship money. That was illegal.
Good.
Yeah, those taxes the king had collected while Parliament was not in session illegal. And they passed something called the Triennial Act. Okay, so this would be something you could write down under Charles I there. The Triennial Act, Triennial. That means that Parliament must meet at least once every, how often?
Year.
3 years.
3 years.
Yeah. So, the Triennial Act, Parliament must meet. You cannot dismiss Parliament for as long as you want. They must meet at least once every 3 years. And this was passed in 1641. Okay? So let's get to the religious stuff here. So there were some radical parliamentarians, they were Puritans that were in Parliament, okay? That pushed for the elimination of bishops in the Anglican Church. So the same thing that happened up here with James. These guys were like, hey, get rid of the bishops and replace them with church elders. That desire was still there. So some of these dudes in Parliament were like, yeah, we still want that. But not everybody in Parliament wanted that, just some of the radical ones. And so they started arguing about that and had a lot of deliberations. And there was this definite rift, this split in Parliament. And the king obviously didn't like this. And he took advantage of the chaos. And he arrested some of the members of these radicals who wanted these changes. You know, they're the Puritans in Parliament. And all of Parliament was like, whoa, wait a second. We're having a debate here. We're arguing about this, but you can't just come in and arrest a bunch of people from Parliament. You just can't do that. Even though these guys might be wrong, you can't just arrest them. So Charles is like, hey, I'm the king. I can kind of do whatever the hell I want. So, a large group of Puritans in Parliament decided the king had gone too far, and England slips into civil war because there are plenty of people who were supporting the king, but there are other people who were supporting Parliament. And so the Civil War breaks out in 1642. And the two sides, well, you have the royalists, those who support the king, and then you got the parliamentarians, those who support Parliament. Okay?
That's a nice
Yeah,
word.
and guys, obviously, most of the Puritans, if not all the Puritans, supported Parliament. Okay? So, 1642, war breaks out. Parliament was victorious in the first phase of the Civil War. There was a guy, they were led by this dude right here, Oliver Cromwell. He was like an uber, overly zealous Puritan. And he created something called the New Model Army. His army was made up of religious, can I say crazies? I mean, these people were overly, like, we're going to kill in the name of the Lord, sort of, you know, overly zealous like that, okay? So the New Model Army was very well trained, and I tell you what, when you fight for religious reasons, ideological things, you know, all hell breaks loose, literally. Okay? I mean, people fight tooth and nail. So, the New Model Army was composed of extreme Puritans who believed they were doing battle for the Lord. So this is what happened. King Charles was actually captured in 1646 by the New Model Army. Somehow, he was able to escape with a little inside help, and he fled
For
to
like
Scotland.
3 years.
He fled to Scotland, and the Scots were like, we don't want to really help you. And this enraged Oliver Cromwell that he went to the Scots and asked for help. So the second part of the Civil War breaks out after this. And this is in 1648. And ultimately, what happens is the Civil War takes another year or so. It ends in a victory for the parliamentarians and
Yay.
Oliver Cromwell. And the king is captured again. So, here's the question. What the hell do you do with a captured king who had clearly overstepped his power, okay, his bounds there? So, they deliberate, and he was condemned on a charge of treason by Parliament, and he was basically
Executed.
sentenced to death. And so Charles I had his head chopped off
A Chinese person chopped it off? Oh, yeah.
on January 30th, 1649.
Don't hurt your holy hands.
You've killed the king.
DJ.
Now what do you do? Well, Oliver Cromwell says,
Abolish the monarchy.
you know, let's just get rid of the monarchy. And Parliament said, yeah, we don't need it. We don't need kings. And Cromwell's like, okay, well, let's just kind of rule through Parliament and see how it happens. And then Parliament and Cromwell stopped getting along. And Cromwell's like, you know what, screw it. You guys are gone too. I'll just go ahead and rule this country. So we've replaced a king with another dictatorial king. Yeah, dictator king. So Cromwell dissolves Parliament, and yeah, that's great, I suppose. He couldn't work with them, so he destroys the king and the Parliament. And his title, he becomes the Lord Protector. He doesn't call himself king. He's the Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England, Scotland, and Ireland. I mean, everybody in Parliament was like debating his authority. This is why he dismissed them. It's like, you shouldn't have that much power. So Cromwell divides the country into 11 regions, kind of like Peter the Great did. Hey, remember I was talking about Peter the Great dividing Russia? Yeah, why did they do that?
More control.
Yeah, more control, collect taxes, things like that. Okay, yeah, good. So he does the same thing. And then he leveled a 10% land tax on all former royalists, all people who, supported the king. I'm going to show you. I'm going to hit you with a 10% land tax. Okay, so that doesn't go over very well. He used military force to enforce it. Thankfully for England, he dies in 1658. Thankfully, yes, exactly.
Not much later.
And the military establishment, his son rules for a little bit, but after, not very long. The military establishment decided, hey, you know what we need to do? We need to bring back the kings. Okay?
Yeah.
So, remember Charles? Are we going to bring him back?
Bring his son back.
You can't bring Charles back because why? Yeah, he's headless.
Huh.
He's not like nearly headless, Nick.
His son.
He's very headless Charles.
I'm not Nick.
Yes.
Oh, whoa. He got.
Very headless Charles.
So Charles did have a brother.
Porn stash.
Oh.
Actually, you know what? No, I take that back. He didn't have a brother. This is his son. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, my bad. Yeah,
Mary
this is his
and
son.
William.
All right, so this is Charles II. And he was in exile in Scotland for like 11 years. Now, Parliament, who had won plenty of concessions during the Civil War, still kept plenty of their power. But Charles wanted to push his own agenda. So in 1672, he issued something called the Declaration of Indulgence. That is a great thing to write down on your sheet there. The Declaration of Indulgence. And what that did is it suspended all the laws that Parliament had passed. And I haven't even really mentioned this, but they passed a bunch of laws against Catholics. And actually they passed some laws against Puritans too. And this irritated Parliament, which was composed mostly at this time of non-Puritans, mostly Anglican church members, Church of England. And they actually talked to the king, and the king said, okay, I'll go ahead and suspend this declaration for now. And in 1673, Parliament passes what's called a Test Act, that only Anglicans, only Church of England members could hold military and civil offices. Could Catholics? No. Could Puritans? No. Only Anglicans.
Only.
And, there's a very strong anti-Catholic sentiment in England at this time, probably because the whole Armada thing and Bloody Mary thing, and still, residual effect of that. All right. So Charles dies in 1685, and his brother comes in. So this is another son of Charles I.
James II.
And he's James II. Mr. Grenzus, are you telling me it goes James, Charles, James when it comes to the kings? Yeah, we got a little crap sandwich in between though. So we're looking at, okay, so I guess the bread would be like James. James, the first, and then James the second. And then, a layer of lettuce on the top, I guess, would be Charles the first, and maybe a tomato underneath would be, Charles the second. But in the middle, that crap sandwich would be Oliver Cromwell.
Oh, true.
So James, Charles, James, and then Oliver Cromwell, I guess, in the middle of that. So anyways, James comes in, and guys, one problem, look at that first bullet point.
Devout Catholic.
He's a serious Catholic. And this is not going to go over well with really a lot of people in England, okay? So, contrary to the Test Act, he named a bunch of Catholics to high positions in the government and in the military.
Oh.
So he breaks the Test Act. Remember, only Anglicans could hold military and civil offices? James is like, screw that. I got a lot of Catholic buddies, and I'm going to put them in charge of certain government positions and certain military positions. And then he issues his own Declaration of Indulgence in 1687. And he suspended all laws that would bar Catholics from office. So he suspended all laws that would bar Catholics from office. All right, hey guys, on a side note, he has 2 daughters, Mary and Anne. And they're Protestant. Okay? Now, they were taken after their mother. James was no longer married to that mother. So this gave hope to Parliament. Hey, if James could meet with an unfortunate accident, or may die a little early, or just get out of power somehow, we'll just bring in, Mary or Anne or someone to rule, because this guy's Catholic. We can't have that. Now, James had gotten remarried, had a second wife, and they did the horizontal hoochie coochie. So, anyways, they did the horizontal hoochie coochie, and they had a son who was Catholic.
Wow.
And all of a sudden, this meant what? Well, this means the son is going to be taking over after James buys the dirt now. And the
What's
son
his name?
could be the beginning of a hereditary Catholic monarchy in England. Yeah, that's not going to happen. So, Parliament says, okay, the daughter Mary is over across the English Channel in the Netherlands. So they send out the call to her and her husband, William and Mary, to come over and invade England and get rid of James II here. So, Parliament invites them. They come over with their troops in 1688, exactly 100 years after the Spanish Armada. 1588, 1688, okay? And they overthrow good old James II. He actually flees with his son
What's his
and
son's
his
name?
wife to, I think they went to France. Yeah, they went to France. Does it say that there? Oh, yes, it's right there, yeah. So they went to France, yes.
And so this was his daughter overthrowing.
Yeah, that's his, daughter overthrowing daddy.
How does she just cross her own family like that?
Because it's all about religion at this point.
Oh.
Yeah. So, here's the thing. This is called the Glorious Revolution, guys, or the Bloodless Revolution. It was super easy. I mean, there was hardly any resistance against William and Mary coming in, because a lot of people really didn't like James II. They didn't like the fact he was Catholic. Hey, come on in, please. Get rid of the king. Thank you very much. And so William and Mary were actually offered the throne of England in 1689, and they accepted. Okay? Now, guys, here's what's ultimately important. This whole English thing going on is basically a battle between the king and Parliament. And who has the power? Is it the king? Is the king absolute? These kings think that, thought they were. Parliament is like, no, we beg to differ. That's what this whole thing is about. Who has the power? So we have some things that emerge that we can relate to here in the United States of America. Okay, so after the Civil War, after the Glorious Revolution, Parliament's like, okay, we need to work on a few things here. Number one, we're going to establish a Bill of Rights. Now, guys, do we have a Bill of Rights in this country? Yes, indeedy. It is the first how many amendments? It's the first 10 amendments of the Constitution. The First Amendment is freedom of speech, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, freedom to peaceably assemble and petition the government. Yeah, exactly. And then the second one is right to bear arms, and okay, so there's 10 of them. So guys, the Bill of Rights was established, and it affirmed Parliament's rights to make laws and levy taxes. So Parliament still has this power. Parliament has the power to make laws and to raise money through taxes. And if you are going to raise a standing army, Parliament has to approve that as well. Only Parliament can give consent to raising an army. What other things were there in the Bill of Rights? Well, you could petition the government if you had complaints. You had the right to bear arms, to keep arms. The right to a jury trial. You can't throw people in jail arbitrarily, so a jury trial. And then no excessive bail. Meaning, if you do go to jail, you can't have a bail set like $10 trillion. Okay? It's got to be logical. So basically what's happening, the rights of citizens are being affirmed. And here's the ultimate importance. This is the beginning, guys, of what's going to be a constitutional monarchy. This is what's it's important with the Bill of Rights. You protect